And Mayor Kevin Faulconer honoring Congressman Lewis' legacy today. In a tweet, the mayor wrote, quote, "John Lewis was no stranger to San Diego. You could often spot him at Comic-Con, and he was here last year to see the USNS John Lewis, a naval ship named in his honor. He dedicated his life to civil rights, from marching with Martin Luther King to serving in Congress. America has lost a legend." And joining us now live via FaceTime is Dr. Shirley Weber. She's a California Assemblywoman, civil rights leader. She knew Congressman Lewis herself. Dr. Weber, first of all, thank you so much for joining us on this Saturday. And really, I just want to hear your reaction when you heard of the passing of John Lewis, because it's so incredible that we've heard from him so much in these last couple of months.
You know, it's truly my honor to be here to say anything at any time about John Lewis, a congressman who was truly an American icon. He was a role model for me. He was a motivation for me. And many times when I had to fight battles at the Capitol, the first thing I think of was the bridge in Selma, and I think of John Lewis. And I think of him being beaten on that bridge. And so I would tell people oftentimes, I know with 953 when we were passing that bill, and it was a lot of issues around it. And I said, and everybody will say, "Aren't you afraid?" And I said, I've seen people who had things to be afraid of. And John Lewis was one of those. And he was my hero. He was the person I would look to and say, you know, I can do this because he did that. And if he could do that, surely we can do these little things like pass legislation. So he was an amazing man, humble in every sense of the word, totally dedicated to this country. And this country, I know of no greater hero that this country has had, who believes so much in the democracy of this country, the systems that were put in place, and his dedication to make things happen and to make them better for everybody.
Absolutely.
You think about his life and you think, oh my God, this man is still moving and grooving. Every time you see him, he had something good to say. He had things to motivate us to continue to fight for what was right. And he never once wavered, and we never questioned his commitment and his integrity and what his motives were. They were not about himself, they were about others. And we have lost a great American. The African American community has lost a tremendous advocate and a fighter. And he will always be remembered in my heart and in the hearts of people of San Diego and around this nation for that reason, and the world, actually.
He was often called the giant of man because of his impact on the entire country in the civil rights movement. How do you think he'll be remembered? And I also want to say, just, you know, so many young people actually know his name, know him well, know his message, know his passion, especially during the Black Lives Matter, and just seeing all this message coming up again so recently.
Well, you know, he will truly be remembered as a person who never gave up. And he lived up to the words that he said, that he never gave up and he never gave in. And even when he was in his 70s, he sat on the floor of the Congress to protest injustices that were taking place at the national level. He never failed to basically give his voice and his body to the causes that were there. And so young people look at him and they admire what he's done, because they know just how hard it is to get attention, just how hard it is to move the needle for change. And this is a man who did that. And they know his name, mainly because he was so humble and so persistent. And he didn't just talk about it, he did it.
He did
and
it.
That's what they remember.
Yeah, and he just had such a kind heart in the way that he spoke. So passionate, really like just reaching in and touching you to stop and listen to his message. I know you actually met him when he was here in San Diego. Would you share your story with us, please?
You know, I've met with him several times when he came to San Diego, when he did his cartoon, his comic book, and he came and met with the young people in our community here. He also came several times with Congressman Faulconer. They had been protesters together. They rode on the bus together, and they actually went to jail together. And so Congressman would often bring him to San Diego. And the beautiful thing was, when he would come to San Diego to do various kinds of things at a higher level, he would always come into the community. If we were having a meeting, he would show up. He would sit in the back or sit amongst us. He never walked in and believed he needed to be on the stage. He would come and sit with those who were protesting, who were raising issues, who were trying to get organized. And he would share with us what he thought were good things that we needed to know about organizing, and always inspire us to, even when you feel like you're not making a big impact, that you really are. And so he was always humble, quiet. We were honored to be in his presence, but he seemed to be honored to be with us, that he loved being with those who wanted to make a difference.
I can see the emotion as you speak. What can people do to honor his memory, to take forward?
I think if you would ask him what would he want us to do, he would say probably don't stop. As he always says, make good trouble, raise the issues. And that's what he would want. I mean, we can always celebrate him with, we have a ship named after him. He has a comic book and he has all these other kinds of things. But I think the greatest legacy that we could ever give to him was to be a protester and an advocate like John Lewis, to never give up, to always look for what was good, what was right, and what was just, and have the courage to stand up and fight.
Ah, such a great message, which he did really almost until his last breath. I really appreciate you giving us your time and your insight in these wonderful stories today, Dr. Weber.